ti condivido anche lo schermo. Aspetta un attimo.
Oscar, ok, sì, visto se mi puoi condividere. Ok, now we switch to English, ok.
Yes.
So Oscar, if you can please share. Okay, perfect, because I had a technical problem and I couldn't share my screen. So, hello and welcome everybody, and thank you for attending this new episode of our virtual Wine, Food and Politics Club. Today with Oscar and Nicola, we have organized this event to talk about the new global equilibrium, and we have the pleasure to host Alberto Forchielli and Professor Francesco Daveri. So thank you for accepting our invitation. And for those of you who don't know, Alberto is the founder of the private equity investment fund Mandarin Capital Partners. He is expert in international affairs and he obtained his MBA with honors at Harvard Business School. Together with Mr. Forchielli, we also have the pleasure to host our full-time MBA director and professor of macroeconomics at the Bocconi School of Management, Francesco Daveri. Thanks, Professor, for supporting our club, and please help us unfolding the complex issues that I'm going to introduce right now. So, just to kickstart the meeting, we thought about focusing on these four key elements. So, China is increasing its influence in areas receiving limited aid, and the world is facing an unprecedented situation. We also thought about the never-ending rivalry between the USA and China, and this will likely increase. And also, what about the current situation that could be a catalyst for unpredictable changes? Last but not least, Europe is suffering from a lack of coordinated response to the pandemic. Therefore, just to kickstart the meeting, I would like to ask, how do you see the future of the first phase trade deal achieved in January between China and US? And will the long-lasting negative effects of this outbreak shift the global balance from west to east? And lastly, coming after the sovereign debt crisis, the migrant crisis and Brexit, how can Europe recover without ending up fragmented? So I will start from Alberto. The floor is yours. And guys, feel free to interact and ask questions with chat or raising the hand as you prefer. Thanks.
Up to me? Is my
yes.
turn to speak? Okay. Couple questions. So you are an MBA students, right?
Yes.
How big is Bocconi class?
Yes, we have many classes. There is full-time MBA students. I see in the chat, Master in Corporate Finance. We have also healthcare. We have also a Master in Fashion Design and Master in Arts Management here tonight, Professor. So Alberto, so a widespread, different students, different masters for tonight's event.
No, but the overall MBA class, 200 people?
92,
no,
less, 92.
92.
It's a small MBA, Alberto. We are a cozy environment.
But how are you positioned in the ranking? You do pretty good, right?
29 worldwide and 9, 8 in Europe, including the UK.
Good. Wonderful. And it's a 2 years program, right?
1 year. Actually, it's between 14 and 15 months, but it does qualify as a 1-year program because seemingly in the international rankings, 2 years starts from 18 months. So we are in between, but when we still keep the 1-year program, and moreover, what we are having is the summer project, which is included in the 1 year. So they start in September and they finish in December. And so the summer project that they are supposed to start in 2 months from now involves either an internship or an entrepreneurial project, so something experiential. Clearly this year things are slightly more complicated than usual, but that's at least what we normally do.
How is your placement record, how many are, what percentage of the class find jobs?
Oh well, we are subjected to the FTE rank. Therefore, we have that about 90% of the people have a job within 3 months after graduation. But that's a normal number that you get when you look at the FTE ranking. One indicator that improved a lot last year was the conversion rate from internships into full-time job, which became something in between 40 and 45% of the total. While instead in the past, I became director 2.5 years ago, but the number was much lower, so it was in the order of 1 out of 5. But the main reason was that once in the past we had the electives after the summer rather than before the summer. So what we are doing now is to have core courses between September and March, and then we are having the electives between March and May. So right now, when you are talking now, we are they are completing the first part of the electives, and then there's a second half of the elective courses. So this way they are somehow cooked up before the end of May, and somehow they have about 6 months to go for the experiential part of the program. So we are trying to squeeze the 2 years in 1 year somehow. So that's the plan.
2-year programs are disappearing.
Yeah, so that's why we are trying 1 year.
Yeah. Now, this is the last question. For someone to be accepted into the MBA, does to have la laurea corta o quella magistrale? 3 years, degree, or 5 years?
No, it depends. As you know, abroad there's no such distinction. So therefore, we take people with a degree, which could be engineering, economics, architecture, whatever. So there's no compulsory laurea magistrale to enter the thing.
Okay.
What is crucial important to come over with an experience. So the average age for our people is about 29, or between 29 and 30. So therefore, whatever degree they have, then they are supposed to come over here with a bag, which is supposed to be non-empty. So therefore, you are supposed to have spent around 5 years, a minimum of 3, and a maximum, I would say, of 8, 9, with rare exceptions, I would say. So this way, you are an interesting person for the other people in the class. Because otherwise, if you are too young, then the other people treat you like a fresher, and so therefore there's no reason to have you around. So that's why we want to have people with some experience.
Okay, I mean, I will have lots of questions for you, but I stop here.
Yeah, of course.
we can talk later.
We can talk later, Alberto. No problem at all.
No.
Of course, ask them.
Alberto, you want to apply to a Bocconi MBA next year?
I love to study. I go to school. I love to go to school. I still go do executive education in many places. This year,
yes.
I did, like in the fall, I did 5 or 6 classes at MIT.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but so I love to go to school, but I'm sort of getting a little bit too old for that. I stand out because I was sort of old. Anyway,
so
okay.
No, from which angle would you like to start to approach this new equilibrium? So I just posed a couple of questions to kickstart the meeting. Could be the trade deal in January, achieved in January, could be the long-lasting effect of the global balance, but feel free to approach the situation from the angle you prefer.
No, I answer the questions, then we'll go on from there. The
Okay.
trade deal is underground now. Nobody talks about it. It's past, because in this environment, China cannot comply. China cannot possibly buy everything they should buy in this environment, everybody knows. So at time Trump says, they can still commit, they can still buy, but it doesn't work. Nobody talks about the trade deal now. The new balance is interesting. Everybody expects a new global balance to come out of this one. But
for example, we were also thinking about the potential shortening of supply chains.
This is a different. Okay, no, okay. You talk about the long-lasting effects of.
Okay, yes, as you prefer.
Balance. I meant China versus US. Who's
Also.
this? Well, long-lasting effects. I mean, to me, long-lasting is after the vaccine.
Yeah.
Up until the vaccine, we'll never be back up to speed. The world will be very slow. Then one day we will have a vaccine and the disease will disappear. What's going to happen afterward? This is how I differentiate. And to be honest, not much.
Okay.
Okay, no, because I read and read about, I try to think, I read and read about what people think should happen. Is really not much. I mean, yes, you will have governments will be more powerful. The state will be more powerful in the economy because they're extending credit. There will be a lot of nationalization. So the intrusion of government and state in the economy will end up very substantial, very much like what happened after 29-30 crisis. Then we created IRI, and then a lot of companies were nationalized, the banks too, and so on. Yes, it will be a more sovereignist, nationalistic economic game.
Okay, so please, go ahead.
Because the government will end up owning a lot of companies, and it will be hard for them to let them go. In that regard, it will change some. Big companies will come out better than small ones. There's nothing to do. The divergence, in the world today, small is no longer beautiful. It's been demonstrated that big companies make more money and everything else. So we are in the world. Big is beautiful, and big will be even more beautiful.
So do you see this scenario, you see that can be likely also for Europe?
Of course.
Okay.
Also, yeah, this applies everywhere. Also, of course, the online world will be very strengthened, okay? Because the world will tend to be more online than before, including education, for example. No, this whole thing is forcing us, is forcing an accelerated pace of change. And we'll keep that. We'll be a more online world. And the big US company will be very big and profitable, especially the high tech. In terms of supply chain, yes, they will shorten some. Company will tend to come out of China. In the future, now companies are in China to produce for China and export. In the future, company will be in China and will produce in China what's strictly necessary to be sold in China. But China will no longer be a base for exports. Too many uncertainties. And especially going forward, labor costs are too high. Okay. You will see Bangladesh coming out very strongly. Bangladesh, not India. You will see Vietnam coming out very strongly. Indonesia, possibly. But it won't be the end of globalization. No way. We had a pandemic before in 1500, 1600, and the world was not global. This COVID-19 is not due to globalization and will not be the end of globalization. But companies have been traumatized a bit because all of a sudden they have access to their supply chain, to their raw material. So yes, they will be more cautious in the future. Okay, company will tend to be less stretched. Eventually, repatriate things from Asia into Europe, repatriate from Asia into US. You may see some of it, but nothing to change the world. So I'm sorry that I cannot turn you upside down with magic about tomorrow's world. But it won't be that. Even the balance between China and US will not change significantly. Because, yes, China is mismanaged COVID-19. He acted too late. US is mismanaging it. Now, it's the balkanized health system, and then a big difficulty in coordination between federal level and state level, a dysfunctional federal level, a lot of bad ingredients. But none of the rest, the world will not forget that this was born in China. And China, intentionally or not, delayed crucial decision by a month. And we will not forget that. Even though China has put up a tremendous soft power campaign, and also, sending goods and sending stuff, but that won't be enough. Now, for example, China is suffering a very, very bad backlash because all the new cases are imported by foreigners. So now they're chasing foreigners down the street, harassing a lot of Africans. This is very negative for China image. So it will be a match. Don't expect, if you want to see changes, you will see changes in Europe. In Europe, you may have some changes. I'm not going to tell you, I don't think Europe will explode. But you may have some countries having difficult financial problems, like Italy, for example. Italy could default in theory. So, yes. So the back to normal could be very messy in Europe, much more easy out in Asia, whereas in due course and in the US. Like the 2008, 2009 crisis was more difficult in Europe than we had the 2011 Euro crisis. For Europe, coming out of this crisis could be a little bumpy, but not, in my opinion, enough to lead to the disgregation of the euro, to be honest.
Okay.
Or the disgregation of the European Union. Then I can go on, but please.
In terms of fragmentation, I guess that you're talking about a fragmentation within the European Union, Alberto. So you think that some of these countries might shift towards China and others toward the US. So there are different kind of deals in the near future.
Well, there is a switch, but the switch is soft. It's not like today we exit NATO, and if you want to observe the switch, you observe now, counting the countries that will decide to adopt Huawei and the countries that decide not to adopt Huawei. The way China enters into country and creates condition for hegemony is very subtle. money come through, investment come through, politicians get bought, newspapers and media got influenced. A very, very subtle way of coming in. Don't expect to be open and transparent.
Okay.
Well, I mean, yes, Italy, many countries do are more at risk to fall under Chinese influence and more Chinese influence, like Greece, like Portugal, for example. Portugal and Greece are considered to be under Chinese influence today.
Right.
But it will be subtle. You have to
Perfect.
be watchful for weak signals.
Yes. Instead, just a quick, sorry, please, Alberto.
China's objective is not to break up the EU, is to condition the EU. Now, for example, the EU cannot issue a joint declaration for the Uyghurs because Greece opposes it. There's nothing hostile to China than the EU can do because there is always a European country that exercises veto power. This to China, this is enough.
Clear. So do you think that somehow both journalists that are talking about this new sanitary belt and roads that is constructed by China will represent a mean used by the Chinese government to increase somehow the sphere of influence inside these countries? And I'm not just talking about Europe, but especially Africa. In terms of continent.
Africa is a done deal.
It's a done deal.
Finished.
Okay, so
Finished.
It's already gone. It's already gone. Okay.
In 20 years, you will see that the new president of Zimbabwe or the new president of Uganda is of Chinese ethnicity.
Right.
He will be the new ruling class of Africa will be the daughters and sons of Chinese immigrants today. They will reach position of power, and that will be the end of it.
Okay.
They will dominate Africa from inside. China doesn't need war. China doesn't fight war. They buy countries, and they how can I say in Italian? They come from inside. They come from within.
Yes.
They buy the political system. They buy the media system, and there are books written on this. It's a very subtle and poisonous influence they have. Now, going back to Europe, they will try something similar, and especially in the weak countries, the periphery, as I said, Greece, Portugal, Italy. But I don't know. Yeah, the sanitary belt road is one element of soft power.
Okay.
But it's just one element. Okay. What really makes the difference is the money.
Yes.
This is just for image. This is like advertising. This is like buying advertising pages on newspaper. But the way they really achieve influence is with big money. When they buy companies, when they finance projects, that's when they buy a harbor, something like that. When they own economic power within a country, that's is when they get it. But sanitary is peripheral, choreographic element.
Okay. No,
Yes.
I agree. Thank you, Alberto. I agree with you, especially on the fact that what's happening now, will not change the landscape, but instead will accelerate what's happening now. For instance, the decrease of foreign policy power from the United States, and instead the hegemony of the power, the soft power of other countries. So we got a lot on this plate that you have said now, and I also would like afterwards to invite our audience to take a spot for asking a question to Alberto. But I would like also to give the word to Professor Daveri. Professor Daveri, I took some notes. We were talking about China, US, nationalization. I remember your recent tweet on Twitter about nationalization, a future IRI. For those who doesn't know IRI, it was a former Italian government-owned holding that control mostly all the manufacturing companies here in Italy. So I would like also, from Daveri's point of view, on what we have said up to now, the macro effects, what can your opinion on it? I have seen the recent forecast from International Monetary Fund, nearly minus 9% GDP. So would like to know your opinion on this also, Professor.
Okay, there's a question coming from the audience from Leone Santilli, which is more specific maybe to one of the things that that Alberto Forchielli mentioned before. So I don't know if Alberto wants you want to take this up before we move on, because I'm not speaking of Zambia and China, but instead maybe you have a comment on this.
So Leone, if you can also raise your question by mic. If not, I'm gonna read it for you. You can have the possibility. Okay. Anyway,
I suggest you go ahead.
Anyway, Leone was saying that in 2017, Alberto, there was a scandal when some Chinese police officers were employed in Zambia, and these Chinese officers have subsequently been removed. So this is what you think about this. You were speaking about pressure on Africa.
I mean, corruption is, I mean, it's, corruption is embedded in everything Chinese do. I mean, they don't have, they use different metrics than we use. So both at home and abroad, yeah, you have to deal with a lot of corruption dealing with the Chinese, but they just don't think it's wrong. They just think they're smart doing it. But this applies also to students, the way the student cheat in the exam. This is very normal for them to cheat. If you cheat and make it, you're smart. And not to be is very different. And that has to do with IP theft. That's different. So that's why we also have a lot of trouble dealing with them. In Africa, for example, US multinational, US or EU laws and so on have strict standards for not to be involved with embezzlement and bribery. That's why we have and it is very difficult to spend this money because bribery helps grease things a lot. So the fact that they can apply bribery tools to most of the things they do is a big advantage for them.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Picking up your questions, I'm not a strategist, so therefore, actually, I mean, I could say something, but certainly it's not my. So I prefer to give you maybe some remarks on the data that the IMF has published today, because I feel more comfortable with these things. So therefore, I'm sharing with you a file, if I can. Let me see. It's an image taken from.
We don't see Professor. Now yes,
yes.
Now yes.
But maybe it's too small. Yes. I don't know. It's taken from the World Economic Outlook released today. So I think it's worthwhile, given that these numbers are big numbers. Then I suggest we take a look at these. The data for 2020 and 2021. They are showing that the world economy is expected to the output of the world economy is expected to decline by 3% in 2020. And since the IMF is collecting data for GDP, there's no precedent to this. So in 2009 was a minus 0.5. This is the lowest number since mid 70s. And then you have to go back to the 30s in order to have to the 30s of the previous century in order to have data comparable to what we are seeing today. The decline in GDP growth for advanced economies is in the order of 6% for this year and -1 for the emerging markets. But the negative number comes from the United States showing a -6, and then Germany showing a -7 or so. The euro area, generally speaking, -7.5. For the emerging markets, you have the China and India are growing in the order between 1 and 2%, which is much less than they are used to do, something in the order of 6%. And instead, you have that Brazil and Russia are paying in terms of very negative numbers, the fact that they are mainly oil exporting or primary goods exporting countries. Given the very low oil prices that we see around, then it's not that strange to see Russia doing badly, -5.5, and Brazil also doing -5.3. Same for Mexico, which is -6.6. So you have the two things go together. And generally speaking, it's difficult to think of this changing in a dramatic way the weight, as Alberto was saying before. So what you are seeing is that there's a big negative number essentially affecting the world economy as a whole. However, these numbers are calculated under the assumption that the worst part of the COVID 2019 would be over Q2 of this year, expecting some sort of an exit, or at least of an end of an emergency in the second half of the year. What the IMF chief economist has said, she said that in case the emergency is not over before the end of 2020, or in case the emergency is over for now, but then it is back in 2021, because suppose some of the safety measures that are supposed to be taken in countries or even in Europe are not adopted, then it might be that we are having a negative numbers for 2021. So essentially what the IMF, the reason I'm mentioning this is not to make test, but just because I think it's useful to be exposed to the first numbers officially set on, written down on paper by an international institution. So that's the first time that we are seeing these numbers. So today I think it's a good starting point in order to analyze this data and to see whether they make sense or not. It could be they're overly pessimistic in case things go better than this, because it might be that the countries that are less affected by the crisis in terms of their economic outcomes might actually be faring better than what we see in the data. But certainly what we see from the US is that seemingly the crisis for now has not been handled with the necessary care, seemingly. And then it's unclear whether the crisis in China is really over, just because it's very difficult to trust the official data being published by the Chinese government. Although certainly, if you look at some objective data for China, they are showing some evidence of a change. So the consumption of coal has gone up. So seemingly they have bottomed, and then we are seeing numbers going up, and same applies to a little bit for the housing market as well. So I think it remains a very essentially an unprecedented situation. But it's important to stick to the data that we have. These are still projections, obviously, but these are the first projections coming from an official source. So I think it's useful to consider them and to put them in perspective in order to understand what's going on. But seemingly, based on the data that we have, China has taken some step in the direction of moving up, although with a little, with some care that is always to be used when looking at Chinese data, while instead the US seems to be a little bit far away from this, although they adopted very substantial policy steps in order to protect their citizens, which still have to deliver an effect and to leave a sign in the actual data. That would be my remarks. Matteo.
Okay, so yeah, Matteo, go, Matte.
Hey, hi everyone. Matteo here from Italy. First, I would like to thank Mr. Forchielli for being here and those people that made this event happening. I have a question for both Forchielli and Daveri. Let's suppose that you are part of this task force led by Blau, and it is given you the possibility to immediately implement 3 different actions to restart the Italian engine. From a 360 degrees perspective, which ones would you deploy or push for?
Francesco, rispondi tu.
Make people safe. That's the first thing. So therefore, it cannot be that you have that you send people back to work with the risk of a backlash. So this cannot be, because then people would be essentially this would be like terrorism on people states of mind. The second thing is I would liberalize working hours for supermarkets and for shops, generally speaking, because this would make, once again, people safer in case when they go shopping. This would take away from queuing, which is an area where potentially, I'm not really sure that this is a very important part of the story, but this is certainly would help people in order to create more choice. And so therefore, so 2 things is preserve people's safety when going back to work. I expect manufacturing to be in the position to be back to work earlier than services, because the services industries, those related to events, hotels and restaurants and so on, they need to reinvent their business model a little bit in order to take advantage of technology more, in order to make reservations, to make it more sophisticated. So therefore, I don't think it's a mission impossible for them, but certainly they have to rethink what they were doing before the crisis, and certainly they have maybe a difficult task, but it's not impossible to fulfill. I wouldn't be over optimistic in promising people there would be a fast return to growth very soon. But at the same time, I mean, if we do make some of the moves, this would reassure people at least, and then in gradual ways we could be back to something more normal. Today is absolutely not normal. I don't know. That would be the things I would think about.
Alberto?
Well, I would, first of all, I think that May 3rd as a date is too late. You're wasting precious time. Too late, the opening on May 3rd. They will start opening the economic activities way before. I will be more speedy in that. And I would consider releasing all those receivables that the public administration has vis-a-vis Italian companies. Is a mountain of money. They could release a lot of liquidity, and there's no moral hazard there. There's money owed, and most of it is more than 360 days old. Then I would reconsider the 90% guarantees, state guarantees for companies, and I would higher it up to 100. I understand the moral hazard, but I'm afraid 90% will never work because still banks have to decide the 10%. That will be like a killer. Nothing will get in that direction, I'm afraid. Have I been clear?
Yeah, but that's not
yes,
in the power. That's not in the power of Colau committee, because you wanted to be the prime. You want to be the prime minister. So if you are the prime minister, then or the minister of the economy, so this is fine. But then instead, if you are Mr. Colau, then you have a little bit of tied hands in this respect.
No, Francesco,
they are crucial.
Dan, you're right. You're the professor here. If I had been your professor, the first thing, the way I would have answered your question was, guys, I tell you why that committee with 17 people with no decision-making authority will never work.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. If I want to do a pedagogical act, good gesture, I would spend time explaining you why that thing doesn't work. But I leave it to Francesco to do it because they don't have to with the illusion that such thing work. It's not fair for them.
Can I?
People.
Eh?
They are grown-up people, so therefore they can judge, sir. But then, yeah, I agree. It's not so. Essentially, the so-called liquidity decree is presumably parking liquidity somewhere rather than putting this liquidity in the hands of companies. And moreover, now we are having, it's not just a question for company to see their bills to be paid by banks, but some of these companies in April, they will have a zero turnover. So therefore, it's no longer a question of seeing your receivables being honored by somebody. It might be that you don't have any receivable anymore. Just because they stop producing, they don't have the option of get themselves paid. And so therefore, I'm not sure enough is done in the liquidity decree for this. So this is it.
Now, can I add something, because this is I think this is an interesting argument. So I thank you, Matteo, for putting this today for us. But because my main concern, I'm a student, I'm not a professor. I'm a student looking also for full-time opportunities post-MBA. My main concern from one side is also to start the activities again, the companies again. But on the other, also the health matter. I'm concerned also about my safety. So I would like to know, how can you manage these two things together in this situation, a pandemic situation? Because I'm very concerned also for the future, what to do, not to do. It's very interesting also hearing you two discussing, but from my personal point of view, I'm also very concerned about the health situation. How can you combine this thing of opening everything with the health situation that we are facing, the health issue?
Well, Korea had a tremendous outbreak, and they solved it without the lockdown. It was a lot of tamponi, and geolocalization. It was a combination of high preventive effort and high tech. Plus, definitely, I think hospital probably didn't leak at all. While in Italy, hospitals are the the bedwetter of a lot of infection.
Yes. On this, I want to add. I work a lot with Singapore before MBA for an Italian company, and I have many friends there, and they were telling me that the government was using a lot of cameras, the biosurveillance capabilities to follow the infected people who potentially is infected. So my question is also, how can we combine for the future also the privacy issue with the public health issue? Because I don't know, maybe also something about our freedom. We need to give up a bit of our freedom for the public health.
Why do you slide into the COVID-19 discussion? That's all the world is talking about. I like your chat because I liked your proposal because you were outside of it.
Yeah.
This is a talk for virologists, high-tech people.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
The newspapers every day, they bombard you with stuff. Because if you go down this route, the discussion sort of dies. Because can't you see it? Oscar, do you agree?
Yes.
Do you
No,
agree?
I agree. I only give my concerns on what's happening. So I would like to share about this.
I cannot solve your concerns. I cannot console you.
Yeah.
Just be brave. Be brave.
We need to be brave. Hard times.
You look very healthy. I read the millennium. Millennials are very worried. There's a very big scare they have. And millennials like you are very worried. Just be brave. Be brave. You're young.
Will do.
Nothing will happen to you.
Will do.
Next.
So I think that we had Francesco. Francesco, can you hear us?
Yes.
Oscar?
Hey, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Yes. Please, Francesco.
Sorry, let me put my video on. I wanted to bring back the discussion to actually the geopolitical. And in particular, I'd like to focus on Europe, the role of Europe, and the future of Europe. And now I want to talk especially with Alberto, because you mentioned this is not gonna be the end of Europe. And my question is, why are you so confident that this is not the case? And do you believe in it? And more than do you believe, do you wish that the European project will succeed? Or do you, on the other hand, prefer that this could be the beginning of the end, and therefore that we will go back to a more independent situation where the sort of every country will be decided on its own?
No, I think European experiment has been fantastic. I mean, you can travel all over Europe without a passport. You can travel in most places without having to exchange money. Goods can go freely. We have an incredible internal market, the size of the US economy. And in the 60, 70, 80 years, we haven't had no wars. I think Europe is a fantastic experiment. And then it's a question of whether the glass is half empty or half full. I think we accomplished a lot, and the next accomplishment, reaching political unity, is very difficult, and I don't think I can see it in my lifetime. So I am disenchanted. I'm not disenchanted. I think I'm being pragmatic. Then I have friends of mine who are desperate. Oh, why union? No, Europe cannot act like one. It is complicated when you have 27 different cultures, 27 different governments. To say, forget everything, we are all one. So I'm happy with what I get. And what we achieved is so much that I don't think is going to be destroyed, because really people care about the common market, care about traveling, care about having peace. But this vision of European Union, then within 20 years become like a federal country like the United States of America, I think it's a dream. It's a beautiful dream, but it's a dream, and you shouldn't be put off if it doesn't happen. It doesn't mean you have to throw out the baby.
But I agree. So, and I would add, so in this situation, I feel like this is yet another proof that of the fact that this European big federal state is probably more of a utopia and a dream rather than something that can become a reality, despite the fact that I really wish it can become so at some point in the future. So then my question becomes, like, if we know that this is a dream, are we ready to accept a situation like this one where we have a partial union where, yes, we do have some good things, we do have one single market, we don't have borders between countries, but on the other hand, we don't have our own monetary sovereignty, and this is kind of detrimental in some cases, and especially for southern countries, we had this issue.
No, guarda, if there was, we are here in Italy still discussing this with a good state of mind, just because there is a European Central Bank that's supporting us. If there was Bank of Italy, we would be bankrupt. We have to thank European Central Bank because they're buying our bonds. Have we not had a European Central Bank, Italy as a country would have defaulted in 2008, frankly speaking. So, again, you can look at this thing from very different perspective, but it's very difficult for a country to print money indefinitely. This happens to Japan, but Japan is a big exception, because Japan is a very, very high net asset, international net asset position. It's a net asset offshore. It can support the yen, sorry. But that is not the case with Italy, with any other European country except Germany. So I really would like to get this idea about the monetary sovereignty of your head.
No, yeah, I'm actually glad, because I need this to discuss with my friends that are Europe detractors, whereas normally I'm always a big supporter and I need arguments to support the cause. So thank you.
Welcome.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Francesco. I have a question, still sticking to the geopolitical issue, Alberto. We talk about China, we talk about the US, we talk about the European Union. Now, my focus is going toward some regional powers, such as Russia. So we saw that Russia moved, they sent some aid to Italy. So you think that these regional powers somehow can take advantage of the COVID outbreak?
Can do what?
Can take advantage of this COVID outbreak, even imposing some geographical presence somewhere.
Taking advantage of a distraction?
Yes, exactly.
Apparently it's not happening. I mean, if it is happening, nobody's telling us. Let me tell you this.
Okay.
The only case is China is moving aggressively in building new bases in the South Pacific. This is something we know, which is being transparent. China is being back very aggressive in the South Pacific, taking advantage of the distraction in the US now, fighting COVID-19. But I'm not aware of either Turkey or Russia doing anything.
Right.
So maybe it is, and we'll find out a month.
We'll find out later on.
Maybe
yes.
it is happening, but nobody, there is no reporter, nobody is even paying attention. That's why they may be successful.
Yes. And Alberto, I have another point that I wanted to share with you. So a recent article, I'm not sure whether it was on the Financial Times or The Economist, was talking about this hegemony in the world between China and the US. And the author of this paper was supporting the fact that in the moment when we are not able to answer to the two following questions, US and the USD, then we are moving toward China. And the questions are the following. So do we trust more? I mean, is the currency we trust the most the USD right now? Yes or no? Are we willing to send our students to the US?
Yeah.
More than to China, yes or no? So this journalist was supporting the fact that as long as we answer yes to these two questions, then US keep staying the main hegemony. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I read the article. It came out the day before.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's a little simplistic.
It's too simplistic.
Well, it's true. The COVID-19 is not damaging the role of the US dollars as international currency, and it's still preferable to go and live in the US than go live in China. Okay, but that's a little too easy. I think China is, in terms of display of power, both soft and hard, and money and wealth, it's unmatchable. The century looks like it is going to be its century, and it's hard to say no. However, the U.S. is fairly resilient. The U.S. has natural resources that China doesn't have. When you look at U.S., you have to think of NAFTA, U.S., Canada, and Mexico, not just U.S.
Yes.
Has very favorable demographics, and it is self-sufficient in food. And so if you add these elements to these two, that is, still people want to go and live in the U.S., and the U.S. dollar is the international currency, then I would say I'm not sure the world will be monopolar.
Yeah.
I don't think the center will be just Chinese. We could live in a bipolar world.
Okay.
Because remember, they're aligned with the US. You have Japan and you have India. India is important. So
yes.
you have a big axis there. So I think China will become by far the most modern, the most powerful country on earth. But I think the world will not be bipolar. Also because the Chinese, I lived in China for many, many years. The Chinese have a damn problem. The problem they have, the Chinese have to fear their internal enemy, not their external enemy. But there is something about the Chinese that when they move and you get them to know them very well, then you decide to keep your distance.
Right. Okay. No, it's very clear.
They can never win our heart altogether.
It's very, very clear. And if you don't mind, I have another point, Alberto. Going back to one of your first...
Excuse me.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I have to leave. I apologize with Alberto first and with the organizers, but 30 for me is a threshold that I cannot go beyond. Otherwise, I have family problems. Then I leave you in good hands.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Professor.
Thanks, Professor.
Naturally, Alberto, just let us know when you need to leave. It's up to you, no problem.
I take 2 more questions.
2 more questions. So, does anyone want to ask? Yes.
Okay, Leone was ready. Leone was ready. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to ask Alberto, who do you think is going to win the next US elections, and how will it influence relationships with China?
Well, if Biden wins, the relation will warm up. Okay? Because Biden is, of all US politicians, is one of the most China friendly. In terms of who's going to win, now Biden is ahead. It's about 5-6 points ahead. But Hillary was ahead by much more, and she lost. So we should never discount Trump. Right now is a 50-50.
So we are waiting for those swing states, as always, to decide.
Exactly.
What will happen. So we have also a couple more minutes, guys. I see also some finance people in the audience. I don't know, maybe this is the occasion to ask something about also Alberto's job. I don't know. I see also. I can ask you a question on your professional side. Where would you invest now? Which are the industries that are going best now, Alberto?
Food, healthcare, pharma, beauty care.
Okay.
Definitely no
Nice.
industrial, no oil, no energy.
Okay, so just a quick question also. We have finished our studies, our masters, MBAs, and so on. What do you think will be the future jobs that will necessary an industry will need? What is the future role an industry will need, in your opinion?
I would try to go like analyst in one of the big tech. The Google, the Facebook, the Amazon.
Okay.
Shoot. More than finance.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I don't see any other people asking for a question. I think that we are 10 minutes out, and we made it, Alberto. So first of all, I would like to thank you for your patience and for also answering immediately to our proposal. This proposal came especially from Davide and Nicola, who proposed it to me. And thank you, Richard, for attending. So this club, next time, Alberto, we are taking you wine and food also. Today we had only, we spoke. Next time we're gonna come to Imola, you're coming to Milan, we are gonna organize a nice dinner all together. And I hope you like our passion that we have on these topics. And I would like to thank you for your insights, for your sincerity, and for your kindness. And this, to all the audience, this registration will be shared by Alberto on his LinkedIn and social network, so you can see it again and share with your friends. And stay tuned for some other new events from the Wine, Food and Politics Club. So thank you, Alberto, for all this community. Thank you, Davide. Nicola. I don't know if you want to add something, Davide, Nicola.
No, just want to thank you, Alberto, and the Wine, Food and Politics Club for the support.
Thank you.
Nico?
Guys, can you hear me? Sorry, guys. I have a problem with the video. I'd like to thank all the audience, first of all, and naturally Alberto, because I was in contact with him and he replied after 5 seconds, so he's very, very respectful, and I really enjoyed all the insights that he gave us from a geopolitical point of view tonight. At the very end, it was clear in terms of what kind of investment we should do. So I think that he proposed even insights about what kind of action Italy and other countries should take from now on in order to overcome this outbreak. So thank you very much, Alberto, for accepting. Thank you very much for sharing some precious time, and hopefully we can meet at some point later on.
My pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Grazie.
In bocca al lupo, eh?
Thank you,
Ce ne
grazie.
ce ne vuole,
Alberto.
ce ne vuole.
Grazie.
Ce ne vuole.
Grazie.
Grazie mille.